Okay, so, we're always digging into the stuff you send our way, right? And lately, there's been this kind of recurring theme
Mm,
around, understanding costs for your online business,
yeah,
which, I mean, it's huge,
it's
right?
absolutely crucial.
And we've got this really insightful article from blogwidow.com
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
that we're going to kind of like pull apart,
I love it.
and really get
Yeah,
into.
let's do it.
So think of this as like your personal shortcut to, really confidently setting prices for your products,
Hmm.
boosting your profitability,
Yeah.
and getting like a rock solid grip on your finances.
Because, whether you're actually shipping physical products out to people
Right.
or you're in the digital world delivering, the magic of digital goods,
Yeah,
it doesn't
it
matter.
all applies.
Knowing your cost structure, it's not just about the numbers, right?
Right.
It's the foundation. It's
Yeah.
the bedrock.
Yeah, it's the foundation of a sustainable business.
Exactly. And I think what's so valuable about this Blog Widow piece
Hmm.
is it's just so universally applicable.
Right.
Like the principles we're going to unpack today
Yeah.
are going to be just as relevant whether you are, crafting bespoke furniture
Right.
or you've got a killer online course.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It's all.
And what we want to do today
Yeah.
is give you like a clear, actionable roadmap
Yes.
without getting lost in the spreadsheet jungle.
Exactly, because nobody wants to do that.
No.
Okay, so let's jump right in
Okay.
with the basics,
Yeah.
like direct costs.
Yes.
Blogwidow.com nails it where they define these as like the expenses you can directly tie to actually creating the thing you sell,
Yeah.
right? So if you're dealing with physical products,
Okay.
we're talking raw materials. This
Yeah.
is like, the beautiful organic cotton you're using, or maybe the specialized circuit boards.
Yeah.
And then there's labor.
Right.
And I think, if you're a solo operator, it's so easy to forget this.
Yeah.
But even the time that you spend directly making your product,
Yeah.
whether you're assembling it, you're crafting it, you're coding it, whatever it is,
Mhm.
that's a direct cost
Yeah.
and it has real value.
Huge.
So I want you to take a moment and think about like, what are the core ingredients or components of what you offer?
Okay.
And are you really accounting for the effort
Yeah.
involved in bringing all that together?
That point about your own labor is so key.
Isn't it?
It's like the silent profit killer.
Yes.
If you ignore it,
Yeah.
think about it this way.
Okay.
If you weren't making that product right,
Mm-hmm.
what else could you be doing with that time?
Yeah.
Maybe you could be marketing.
Right.
You could be strategizing.
You could be on vacation.
Maybe you could be enjoying some downtime.
Yes.
That opportunity cost has value.
Totally.
So now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about digital products.
Okay.
Blogwidow.com highlights things like the cost of specialized software. So, if you're doing video editing or licensing fees for things like stock photos and music, or if you're outsourcing and you're having somebody else, develop your website or do your copywriting.
Right. Right.
What's so interesting here is even though in the digital world,
Yeah.
things can seem so intangible,
Right.
there are very real tangible costs
Yeah.
involved in creating these things.
Absolutely.
So I want you to think about your digital products.
Hmm.
What are those tools
Yeah.
and those services that are absolutely indispensable?
Yeah. What are those things you couldn't live without?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about what goes directly into making your product.
Right.
Now let's zoom out a little bit
Okay.
and look at those expenses that keep your business humming, but aren't necessarily tied to any specific item you sell.
Yeah.
Blogwidow.com calls these indirect costs
Right.
or overhead, and they give some great example.
Yeah.
Your rent,
Okay.
your utilities,
Yeah.
those monthly software subscriptions
Right.
that power your operation,
Huh?
even like wear and tear on your equipment.
Yes. And this is where things can get a little tricky
Yeah.
because these costs aren't always top of mind
Right.
when you're thinking about, the cost of one specific product.
Exactly.
But they're absolutely essential for the health of your business overall.
Yeah.
And blogwidow.com makes this really smart observation about home-based businesses.
Okay.
Even if your office is your spare room, a portion of your rent and your utilities
Right.
are absolutely legitimate business expenses.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Right.
So think about like, what are those regular payments
Yeah.
that you're making?
Yeah.
What are those recurring costs that you would still have even if you didn't sell a single extra unit this month?
Exactly. And factoring those in even as a reasonable allocation,
Right.
is so important
Yeah.
for understanding your true cost of doing business.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've looked at direct costs of creating your thing,
Right.
indirect costs of kind of running the show.
Uh-huh.
Now, blogwidow.com introduces another really helpful way to categorize costs.
Okay.
Variable versus fixed.
I like it.
So variable costs,
Yeah.
these are the ones that kind of dance with your sales volume.
Hmm.
So the more you sell,
Mm-hmm.
the higher these go.
Okay.
So think about like shipping fees.
Yeah.
Every time you send out an order,
Right.
that cost is incurred.
You got it.
Packaging materials,
Yeah.
another great example.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody selling online,
Hmm.
blogwidow.com specifically calls out payment processing fees,
Right.
which, they might seem small for each transaction,
Yeah.
but they add up so fast.
Oh, yeah. Imagine those fees as like this tiny little percentage of each sale.
Right.
When you're just starting out,
Yeah.
it might seem negligible,
Right.
but as your sales start to climb,
And we want them to.
and we want them to, those percentages translate into real money.
Yes.
It's like this little stream
Yeah.
that turns into this river
Wow.
flowing out of your profits
Okay, I like that visual.
if you're not careful.
So what variable cost do you see
Yeah.
having that like really direct relationship
Hmm.
with your sales volume?
Okay.
Are there any that maybe surprise you
Yeah.
in terms of how much they scale?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, so on the other side, we've got our fixed costs.
Okay.
These are like your old reliables, your
Ah.
constants.
Right.
They pretty much stay the same, no matter if you have a blockbuster month
Okay.
or a quieter one.
Got it.
Vlogwidow.com lists things like website hosting fees,
Yeah.
salaries if you've got employees,
Hmm.
and even your basic office supplies.
Right. And it's so important to remember that these costs don't disappear just
No.
because sales slow down.
Right, they're always there.
They're always there,
Yeah.
ticking away.
So as blogwidow.com really emphasizes, you need your sales to cover those overheads.
Yeah, think of it like this.
Okay.
Your fixed costs are like the baseline you need to clear every single month just to stay afloat.
Right, just to keep the lights on.
Exactly. And understanding this
Yep.
is the essential groundwork
Okay.
for figuring out your break-even point.
Right, which is that magic number
Yes.
that every business owner wants to know.
Exactly. As blogwidow.com explains, this is the point
Yeah.
where your total revenue
Mm.
exactly equals your total costs.
Okay, so no profit, no loss.
No profit, no loss. You're just breaking even.
You're just treading water.
Exactly.
Okay, so they give us this formula.
Yeah.
Fixed costs divided by selling price minus variable cost per unit.
Right. It might sound a little bit like algebra class,
It does.
but
In fact-
understanding the why behind it is pure gold
Yes,
for your business strategy.
it's so important.
Absolutely.
Okay, so knowing your break-even point,
Yeah.
it's like having a financial compass. It tells you exactly how many units you need to sell to cover all of your expenses.
It's that dividing line between operating at a loss
Right.
and actually starting to build a profitable business.
Right. And if we zoom out again,
Yeah.
this number isn't just an abstract calculation.
No, it's not.
It's informing everything.
It informs your sales targets.
Right?
It informs your marketing efforts.
Yeah.
Even your decisions about taking on debt or investments.
That's so true.
So have you ever run this calculation for your business?
Yeah.
And what were some of those key fixed costs or per unit variable costs
Right.
that really jumped out at you?
Yeah, it's always eye-opening.
It is.
Okay, so once you've pinpointed that break-even number,
Yeah.
the next step is figuring out your profit margin.
Okay.
Blogwidow.com defines this as the money you make from each sale after all your costs are paid.
Right.
And they point out that it's usually expressed as a percentage of your selling price.
Yeah.
So they give this really clear example. If your product cost you $50 to make and you sell it for $75,
Okay.
you've got a 33% profit margin.
And this is where your vision for your business really comes into play.
Yeah.
What kind of profit margin do you need to achieve your goals? It's this delicate balancing act, isn't it?
It is.
You need to price competitively within your market,
Right.
but you also need to make sure you're generating enough profit to reinvest back in your business,
Right.
pay yourself a decent wage,
Yeah.
and, weather any unexpected storms.
Right.
So this brings us to the big question.
Okay.
What are your financial aspirations for your business? And how do those translate into the profit margin you need to hit on each sale?
That's a good question to think about.
It is.
Okay, so that leads us nicely into pricing strategies.
Yeah.
BlogWidow.com spotlights a couple of really important ones.
Right.
First, there's cost plus pricing.
Right.
This one's pretty straightforward. You calculate your total cost to make your product, and then you just add a fixed percentage on top of that to get your selling price.
Right. So the article points out that while it's simple, it might not always line up with what your customers are willing to pay.
Right.
Or what your competitors are doing.
That's a good point.
That's one of the limitations of cost plus pricing. It's very internally focused.
Okay.
It doesn't always reflect what's happening in the market.
In the real world?
Yeah. It's like setting sail without checking the weather forecast.
Uh-oh.
You might end up in a storm.
Nobody wants that.
No.
Okay, so the second strategy BlogWidow.com talks about is value-based pricing.
Yes.
And this is a completely different approach.
It is.
You're setting your prices based on the perceived value of your product to your customers.
To your customer.
Yeah. And as BlogWidow.com points out, this strategy has the potential for higher profit margins.
It does.
Because you're not just covering costs. You're capturing some of that value that you're giving to your customer.
Delivering.
But they also mention that to do this well, you need to really understand.
You have to know your audience.
Your target audience.
Yeah.
What problems are you solving for them, and how much are they willing to pay for that?
Exactly. And you also need to be aware of what your competitors are doing.
Of course.
So we've got these two very different approaches.
Yeah.
Which one resonates more with you? And you know your business model and the unique value proposition of your products.
Yeah.
Or could you maybe blend the two?
Yeah. I think often it's a bit of a hybrid approach.
I think so too.
Right.
You need that solid understanding of your costs as your foundation.
Right.
But then you layer on that understanding of what's happening in the market and the specific value that you're bringing.
That you bring to your customers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So insightful how all of this ties together.
It is.
Like accurate cost calculation and really thoughtful pricing strategy.
Yeah. You can't have one.
You're so intertwined.
You can't have one without the other.
Right.
If you want to build something that's sustainable and profitable.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just bring it all together.
Okay.
You know, inspired by all this wisdom from blogwidow.com.
Love it.
We kicked things off by defining direct costs. You know, the raw materials, the labor directly involved in making your product.
Right.
Then we explored those indirect costs or overhead, you know, those necessary expenses like your rent, your software.
Yeah.
We broke down that super important distinction between variable costs, which fluctuate with sales, things like shipping, payment processing, and fixed costs, which are pretty constant, like your website hosting.
Exactly.
And then we dug into this concept of the break-even point.
Yeah.
That number of units you need to sell to cover all those costs.
To cover all your costs.
And finally, we talked about setting your profit margin.
Right.
And examine different pricing strategies from cost plus to value-based.
That's right. And the core message from blogwidow.com is so clear. They're saying meticulously calculating these different costs isn't just some task for your accountant.
Right.
It is the cornerstone of building a successful and profitable online business.
It's so true.
It's that data you need to make smart decisions about how you price things, how you manage your finances, and ultimately how you create a path for sustainable and meaningful growth.
I love it. Okay, so as you're reflecting on everything we've talked about today, all these insights from the blogwidow.com piece, here's a final thought.
Okay.
What's one fundamental assumption that you might be making right now about your current pricing model that deserves a second look to ensure the long-term health and growth of your business?
This is a great question to ponder.
It is.
I like that.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
So hit us up on social media.
Absolutely.
Let us know.
Let's keep this conversation going.
What you think.
Yeah.
Okay, until next time, happy costing.
Yes, indeed.
And we'll see you on the next deep dive.
See you later.
Bye.